Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Season 3, Episode 6, Sleepless in Ponyville. This is an episode in which the three Kingdom Crusaders go out with their big sisters in order to go camping, but alas, Scootaloo is suffering from fears and nightmares, so Luna has to help her through that, and she does the end. This is an interesting one. This episode is written by Corey Powell. Now, you're probably thinking, who the heck is Corey Powell? And I don't blame you for asking that very question, because I never heard of him either. So I did a little looking into it. Corey Powell is... I don't actually know the proper term, but he's basically a guest writer. He hops around from show to show, and he usually writes only a few episodes each. In fact, there are only 4 episodes. Thank you, Dr. Papa Penguin. There are actually only 4 episodes in My Little Pony that this guy writes. And that's pretty normal. He writes 10 episodes in Sid the Science Kid, 1 episode in Todd World, 1 episode in Land Before Time. Looks like 4 episodes in Mutt and Stuff, and so forth and so on. So he bounces around. What I find interesting is he seems to have done a pretty good job with this episode, despite not actually being, part of the regular crew. However, this is actually one of the reasons why good guest writers are a good thing. Because they're a good way to try and, pull a Wrath of Khan, to be blunt about it. Remember, Wrath of Khan was written and directed by someone who'd never even watched Star Trek before. Just to put that into perspective. So it's something that if I ever get to the point of actually making regular extant stuff, I will be actively doing myself, trying to reach out to people and being like, hey, could you do me a favor and, come in and give me a story idea, pitch a story idea. Because when you get someone who actually is a talented and skilled writer, they come in and they look at things and they tend to spot things that the regulars don't. Like, well, why don't we follow through on this thread? Why don't we push forward this idea? And et cetera, et cetera. Either way, he came in and he saw this and he was like, you know what? We need to push forward the Luna stuff. And so, this is now basically our 2nd Luna episode, if you're paying attention, in 3 seasons. I mean, technically there's the 1st episode, but really, this is our 2nd Luna episode. This is also the episode that establishes that Luna's domain is that of dreams, which will be a regular recurring element going forwards. We'll see, Savacom. So far, only 2 people have written stories for it, and I doubt that number will go up. Anywho, so of course Scootaloo wants Rainbow Dash's appreciation. First is the most obvious reason, because she venerates Rainbow Dash, right? She was the head of the frickin' fan club in a previous episode. But then there's the fact that I'm trying to think of the nicest possible way to say this. She doesn't seem to have much of a family unit. Now, I believe we will see Scootaloo's parents in the future, so they're probably alive. But we really don't see any presence of them, whereas we do see Applejack and the Apple family, as well as obviously Rarity. But effectively, Rainbow Dash is going to be coming and supplanting the position as family unit for Scootaloo. Apparently, Season 9 is when that shows up, so that would explain why I haven't seen it yet. Yeah. We'll talk about that, I suppose, in a few months when we get there. Either way, she has this wonderful bit where she's basically fangasming out. Like, oh my god, it's like she practically told me she wants to take me under her wing and become my big sister character and all that fun stuff. I really am curious why exactly she feels the need to have a big sister in her life, but it's also worth noting that there's 2 other reasons that would make sense. The first and most obvious is there's an appeal to having a sibling, especially an older sibling. I don't really have that myself. I am the older sibling. But at the same point, having a sister is something I've wanted since I was extremely young. So, and, as Lord Harrimont points out, both of her best friends have elder sisters and have wonderful relationships with those elder sisters. Right? So it makes perfect sense that this is the kind of thing that she would seek out and want actively. So, Rarity goes along with the camping trip, which I find amusing. First, obviously this is part of character development. This is something that has been developing. The fact that she wants to be a part of Sweetie Belle's life and wants to not be... wants to be a good elder sister. We've had a whole episode about that very topic, and that will come up in the future as well. In fact, another interesting point, we also find out in the future that these camping trips amongst this particular group of 6 ponies becomes a regular thing in the future. Just interesting to think about, especially given where we're going to be going with that. But let's leave that aside for right now. Now, the episode obviously makes fun of Rarity and her camping and comfort thing. How many of you have ever gone camping? I suppose I should raise my hand on this. How many of you have had the benefit of being able to do what I have referred to already as camping in comfort? And I'll raise my hand again on this one. See, there's camping, which is you go out and you have a bedroll or a sleeping bag, maybe a tent, right? And then there's camping in comfort, which is kind of what Rarity does in this episode. In my case, we had a little, I can't think what the term is, a log house, basically. And it was actually a well-proportioned, well-taken-care-of log house, and had actual comfortable beds and heating and air conditioning and a fire and a kitchens where we could cook food and blah, blah, blah. But it was also a well-positioned one. It was basically right out in the middle of freaking nowhere, in the middle of the redwoods. And we could just go out and go, camping, and then come back and return to the safety of the and comfort of the base every time, or space, whatever the proper term is for that place, afterwards. In other words, camping in comfort. I only bring that up because that's actually stuck with me for a while, and obviously we look at concepts such as fiction, where we have both fantasy and science fiction, which offer better possibilities for camping and comfort. I mean, in D&D, there's literally a spell to conjure a magical mansion that you can hang out with servants who will take care of you and your needs while you're hanging out there, and then you could head out and go camping afterwards, right? I mean, I get that spell in every mage ever, Shikor. And that's why I bring that up. As much as as much as the episode goes out of its way to try and make fun and poke fun at Rarity, I'm actually more with her than anyone else there. And yeah, I should point out that I'm speaking of Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, obviously, but there are lower level spells than that, which also allow you to have similar creature comforts. I'm fine with going out and hiking and, scavenging and hunting and most of the aspects of camping I'm actually down with, and I have enjoyed several times in my life. It's when you go back to camp at night and you have to lay down on what is effectively the ground with rocks jutting into your back and spiders sneaking into your bedroll. That's the part I'm not a fan of. Personally. Either way, I'm kind of with Rarity because I don't like spiders in my bedroll. Go figure. Anyways, I just wanted to comment on that because as she's doing this, I was like, wow, that actually sounds pretty cool. Can I have that tent? Rarity, you got a second one of those tents that I could use? Yeah, no kidding, Savicom. I agree. This episode did kind of move that forward a bit. AJ and Rarity have been getting closer as friends for most of the show at this point, which I'm kind of down with. Quick aside, by the way, this episode is very Looney Tunes. Anyone notice that? Yeah, it was inflatable, too. You gotta say it right, Sierra Mike. There's a snake in my boot. But there's a lot of, Looney Tunesiness. Most notably around Scootaloo as she's asleep or she's digging through the ground or whatever. And I will admit it doesn't bother me as much as it usually does, mostly because of the rest of the episode. But I have to admit, I was mentally just kind of checking out for several of the cartoony sequences. Because I bet, Sierra Mike. Yeah, dear kids, don't drive when you're impaired. I don't have that problem. I sleepwalk. Which is actually very unpleasant. Especially when you wake up. I think I've mentioned this before. I've woken up in the middle of a conversation on the phone with someone once, and it was one of the most disorienting things. Anywho. So, Looney Tunes aside. I get why, but I have to admit, probably my actual biggest complaint about this episode is that Scootaloo lies blatantly and badly constantly. I've talked about this before. I'm not a fan of lying, especially repeated lying, especially lying for humor's sake. It's just not something I'm into. I will say at least there's a reason for it. At least there's some definitive reason other than, ha ha ha. No, she's trying to get Rainbow's approval. She wants Rainbow to see her as someone who's cool and worthwhile and you know, is someone who is deserving of the love that she is currently not receiving. Or at least feels that she's not. By the end of the episode, we see that Rainbow very clearly does actually care about her. And very obviously does have that kind of familial, protective, big sister love towards her. But it's obvious also why Scootaloo doesn't feel like she has that, or, more to the point, feels like she has to earn it. And that's something I understand very well. It also, it's played off for laughs, but this is actually pretty well done, I'd say. Yeah, no, I love that too, Savicon, very much so. The way Rainbow Dash handles Scootaloo's open confession. That could have gone very badly. There's a bit towards the beginning where Scootaloo's like, okay, I've got to stay cool, I've got to seem cool. How many of you have ever felt that way? Either because there was a group of kids you wanted to seem cool around, or maybe you wanted to establish yourself in the schoolyard, or maybe you just wanted to seem neat when you're going to like the skating rink or whatever, or the arcades, or maybe it's someone that you're interested in romantically and you want to seem cool for them, something like that. Because I've experienced all of those. Up until, I'd say, just late grade school. Right around 7th grade is when I finally realized that just wasn't working. Because every time I tried, every single time, what happened to me was basically the exact same thing that happened to Scootaloo in this episode. Stumble. In my case, it was usually verbal stumbling rather than literal physical pratfalling, but the fact remains. And right about 7th grade, I just started saying, screw it, I'm just going to be me. And as you probably have heard me say before, I was the kid everyone got along with, or who got along with everyone. So the being me thing actually worked out in my case. I know that doesn't apply to everyone. But I just wanted to say I completely felt Scootaloo there, because I remember that. It's just, oh my god. I remember this one time. I can't even believe I'm sharing this story because I'm absolutely humiliated by the story. This would have been 5th grade. And no, I'm wrong. This would be 6th grade. Sorry. 6th, yep, I'm right. 6th grade. And this was towards the tail end of me finally starting to get away from that. But this one time I told this kid who I was wanting to be friends with, you know what, I can't even bring myself to say it. It's so stupid and humiliating. Let's just say I lied to them to try and make myself seem cooler. And they actually bought it, and that led to some interesting problems until finally I had to own up on that one. I never talked to him again. It was just... wow. Still can't believe I did that. Anyways. What? Don't you remember things that you're absolutely embarrassed and humiliated from? Humiliated about from about 30 years ago? That's not just me, right? Anyways. I remember things when I was in 3rd grade, and we were having the end of school thing. I was bawling like a baby because I would never get to see my teacher again. And she didn't get the big deal. She was actually a good teacher, I remember her, but she didn't understand why it was a big deal. And I was just like, no, we're never going to see each other again. And we never did, funnily enough. I was right. Because I moved a lot back when I was a kid. But, yeah, I remember that one pretty embarrassingly. I remember when I was in 2nd grade, I actually refused to tell my mother that the person who was babysitting me was actually, like, really, really unpleasant to be around, to the point where I hated it. Because I didn't want to be a bother to my mom. Yeah. So I put up with a lot of crap during that period of time. Let's see, what else? I could probably come up with more. Anyways, let's move on. Fear. Scootaloo demonstrates fear in this episode several times. And, as usual, the actress, who I looked up her name. Did I write it down? Please tell me I wrote it down. Please tell me I wrote her name down. I swore I looked it up. Madeline Peters. There we go. Madeline Peters just does a really, really, really good job of Scootaloo in this episode. I'm glad you like them, J Meister. I do try. I do have several. Because we actually talked extensively, if you'll remember, about fear as a concept back during the Sombra episodes. You know, the Crystal Empire two-parter. Fear is so horrifically insidious and powerless. It's actually kind of weird to think about, especially with a distant perspective. But that's exactly what happens to Scootaloo in this episode. She is terrified of nothing, for the most part, and her fear is getting to her and preventing her from doing things, even though it actually has no real power over her. It's just interesting to see that. Again, none of this is a derogatory comment. The bit where she freaks out going to get the twigs comes to mind most strongly about that. You know, the part where she has to rush out there and she's just crying out to herself and just grab, go, you know, constantly moving, constantly yelling. That thing. Yeah, I felt that. So then we have the Headless Pony story. I love how AJ immediately points out how dumb that is. Where's its brains? I said headless, not brainless. Well, where does it keep its brains? Anyway. I also kind of like how they once again showcase how it's okay to be afraid. That is to say, it's okay to be scared. I know this is a strange thing to comment on since most people understand this quite well, but it is a good lesson for kids. There's nothing wrong with a horror film, right? I mean, there's a reason horror is an entire genre, right? And why people like to go on roller coasters. Or why people like to hang out on Halloween. Like, we had a whole episode that actually covered the same concept. The other Luna episode before this one, ironically. That being scared can be fun under the right circumstances. So that's kind of cool. They have a specific scene, which I remembered, where, you know, they finished the Headless Horseman story, and Sweetie Belle and Apple Bloom both go, "Ah!" and then start giggling and laughing because they're having fun. The only one who's actually not having fun is Scootaloo, and the only reason that that's really a problem is because she refused to tell anyone about it. But yeah, that thrill, that rush, there's an enjoyability about that to a lot of people. I'm with it, you know. I don't get it personally, but I'm with it. I understand it. It's a demonstrable truth. This, of course, leads to a really weird section of the episode where Sweetie Belle sings 99... I forget what. 99 bottles of something on the wall. Really, really badly. I remind you, Sweetie Belle's the one who's the good singer of the group. But more to the point, what? Buckets of oats, that was it, thank you. 99 buckets of oats on the wall. 99 buckets of oats! I believe is roughly how that should go. Don't worry, I won't sing the rest. Either way, what I do like, though, is, and Sean just pointed this out, both Rarity and Applejack immediately comfort their younger sisters to help show that it's okay, it's not really something to be scared of. You'll notice this is something Scootaloo does not get. Rainbow is the one telling the story, but also she makes no effort to try and comfort Scootaloo. And I wonder if that's because she wouldn't to begin with, because, you know, you gotta be tough, or because of the fact that she doesn't think Scootaloo is scared because Scootaloo is lying. This is purely just headcanon, but I like to think that if Scootaloo had been similarly overtly scared, Rainbow would have comforted her as well. Just my thought. Because again, the episode makes it really clear that she does actually care about Scootaloo in about a step and a half here. Because the next thing that happens is our next dream sequence. The first dream sequence was decently well done. You notice we can immediately tell it's a dream because of the palette change. Oh yeah, sure, there's the big creepy forest in the background, but the palette change is really what showcases it. And they do this each dream sequence, even the final one. But during this one, she goes into the dream cycle, the Headless Horseman's coming after her. Oh my god. And Luna shows up finally. She actually had a cameo earlier, but Luna finally shows up. You'll notice, by the way, Luna has not lost her flair for the dramatic. She's a little better at making it less scary, but she's still got the royal princess thing going on for her, which I think fits her quite well. Like I said earlier, this is the episode that codifies the idea that Luna is in charge of dreaming, that the after-hours nighttime thing is her domain. Can I just say that I really like this idea? It also fits neatly with the idea of the sun and moon dichotomy, because there's actually not really a dichotomy between the sun and the moon. Not really. But the idea, the thematic concept of the daytime activities and the nighttime activities, it's nice the way they divvy this up, and there will actually be future episodes which discuss how much Celestia has to do during the day and how much Luna has to do at the night. So I like this. I like what they did with this. And yeah, Luna is pretty awesome in this episode. As usual, Tabitha St. Germain is amazing. What do you mean, Sierra Mike, other than what I just mentioned? But the other thing I wanted to mention about that, though, is once again we have someone being portrayed as a reasonable authority figure, which is good. As I've said before, kids need to know that at least some authority figures are reasonable authority figures. Obviously, there are exceptions, and we've talked about that extensively in the bowling episode. But sometimes the adults actually do give a damn, and identifying which ones those are, and being willing to go to those people is something that's kind of important. Yeah, basically the exact opposite of the Nickelodeon problem. You remember Nickelodeon, right? Where even the good adults are the bumbling idiots who are constantly saved by the kids. Like, I liked Inspector Gadget as much as anyone else, but Gadget himself was a moron. Penny was the one who always did all the stuff. So, nice to see that being showcased with Luna. And you notice how Scootaloo immediately opens up to Luna, which is good. She's also the first person she opens up to. Luna also tells her a couple things I find interesting. She says, everybody has fears. Which, I'm just going to stop that sentence right there, actually. Because that's an extremely important thing to keep in mind. I've said this before and I'll say this again. I think too much of culture, not just fiction, but culture, tends to push the idea that you should be fearless. In my opinion, that is stupid. Because not only is it impossible, but it's also derogatory towards the effort of actually bothering to try, regardless of fear. As we've said a few trillion times, bravery is not being unafraid. Bravery is being afraid and not letting it stop you. Fear is an extremely natural response, emotionally as well as instinctually. And fear is the kind of thing that can be a good thing. For many, many, many reasons in terms of literal physical survival, as well as enabling you to properly organize and function within a society. Right? It's not letting it get out of hand. Not letting it control you. That's kind of the catch there. And yeah, very good quote, Kevin. A man is a fool without fear. Could name a couple anime characters like that. So, the very message of everybody, actually she says every pony, but every pony has fears, is a good message. She then immediately says every pony must face those fears or the nightmares will continue. Which is also kind of true. And again, gets back to what I was just talking about. Bravery, courage, being able to not allow fear completely dominate your life. I admit I still struggle with that one, if I'm just going to be completely real for a second. Because I still have certain fears in my life that I've never really fully conquered. And most of what I do to deal with that is to just avoid it. Because I can't deal with it. So, I still have my nightmares. I had one last night, actually. No joke. So, it is the kind of thing that I still struggle with, and I still empathize with, and that's one of the reasons why I feel like that's a lesson that isn't just applicable to kids. And yeah, it is extremely true for Luna herself. Ah, gotcha, Sierra Mike. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. She doesn't really become reasonable and personable until much later. After the nightmare, after the dream sequence, she obviously wakes up. Luna's kicked out, because dream. This leads to, you know, the big moment, and honestly probably the best scene in the episode, and what really sells the episode for me. Scootaloo runs away and nearly either gets severely injured or might have actually died. Depending on how severe it is up to you. Again, we've had a lot of Looney Tunesing in this episode, and that tends to remove, you know, threat of consequence. But either way, she ran out in the middle of the woods in the middle of the night, and was going to get hurt one way or the other. Rainbow Dash finds her, thankfully, and is so angry sounding. Now that's actually really important, because anger based off of worry is different. And I'm sure most of you know exactly what I mean by anger based off of worry. Because not only does it help to very firmly establish that Rainbow Dash does care, but it's also something that kids do need to understand. They need to know that tone. They need to know the difference between, you know, unpleasant anger or violent anger or whatever, and anger based off of worry. If someone yells at you because you nearly just fell off of a cliff, that's because they care about you. Right? I'm sure a lot of you know that one on both sides of that equation. I don't know, Weads. It wouldn't surprise me. Rainbow Dash doesn't really have that kind of familial connection. As we see in the future, she's not really that connected to her own parents. She has no siblings, unless you count Fluttershy. Although she does go to Fluttershy's family several times, so that's clearly a connection. So, it wouldn't surprise me if Rainbow Dash wants a younger sister, too. Either way, she gets angry, and she yells at Scootaloo, and Scootaloo finally opens up, and then Rainbow Dash perfectly responds to that. And is like, look, I'm going to tell you the truth, but if you tell anyone, I'm going to deny it. It's just such a great scene. And I really like the idea that she just so utterly embraces Scootaloo, emotionally as well as physically in that scene, because she needed to. Scootaloo needed that in more ways than one. And as I mentioned earlier, Madeline Peters just nails Scootaloo in this episode. Also, I love the amusement of, they keep talking about her taking her under her wing. That actually pays off in a very small pun when Rainbow Dash literally grabs her with her wing and pulls her in. The episode basically ends at this point. You know, Rarity goes and hangs out with Scootaloo, or excuse me, Sweetie Belle. It's true, Kevin. And, you know, the episode kind of ends on a little bit of a wah-wah. I'll let you guys decide how much that one counts. Ultimately, kind of a hard episode to judge, because it follows through very logically on a lot of previous events. And it also establishes several things that will be continuity going forwards. But the episode itself is mostly just kind of there for me. That's why I'm just looking at it like, I think we'll make this one orange. Yeah, we'll do that. Either way, that is all I've got. Look at my notes here. So, I'm going to chop off the local recording really quick, but don't go anywhere just yet.